Hi, everybody. It's Susan again. Here we're going to have a look at Mars coming into Cancer. And I'm recording this on the 2nd of September, so it's only a couple of days away. And by the evening of Wednesday, the 4th of September, in Universal Time, Mars will be at 0 degrees of Cancer. So this is a really interesting ingress. I don't often do videos for planetary ingresses, but when they're, let's say, relatively rare, and especially when they're significant, and this one is because Mars will be retrograding in this cycle, then I put a lot of attention on the ingress. If it's your planetary ruler, really listen up if you're an Aries or a Scorpio, or if you have a very prominent Mars, for example, Mars conjunct your Sun or your ascendant or your midheaven, Mars with the Moon or Mars aspecting, especially in hard aspect to those planets, then pay attention to this cycle because this is going to bring something out that's very personal. Mars is in the dwelling of the Moon in Cancer. Now, in general, we look at Mars as debilitated in Cancer because it actually is, or rather in fall, not debilitated, but in its fall in Cancer because it's exalted in Capricorn. And the reason it's exalted in Capricorn is because Saturn rules Capricorn. And Saturn you can think of as the general or the leader in terms of an administrative role, someone who gives orders or provides a structure. And Mars does really, really well when there's a purpose and an aim and a drive. And in Cancer, we don't find that. We find Mars, which is more like the soldier or the worker, the laborer. The one who does the action, let's say, that the general wants it to do. It's guided by the moon, which waxes and wanes and fluctuates, and it's not very clear, and often is not clear in terms of the outer desire or the outer goal, but it often comes from a kind of an emotional goal or emotional desire, an emotional place that's not even very clear potentially to the individual experiencing that. So this is why Mars is not entirely happy in Cancer, and yet at the same time, the moon is neutral to Mars as a ruler of Cancer. The moon doesn't have enemies, actually. The moon is quite happy-go-lucky, but Mars affects the moon in a bad way. So the Mars is actually it's friendly to the moon, but it also creates a dynamism that makes a person perhaps reactive in a way that they may not be. Now, all of what I'm saying is going to be a very general outlook. I can't know how this is going to affect you because how Mars will behave is going to depend on two things in your life. One is the quality of your own moon, and the second is the quality of your Mars in your chart, and of course, where it's placed. So we can look sign by sign and see how these things pan out, but it's not necessarily going to be your experience. And Mars in Cancer can actually be extremely invigorating and really revitalizing if your Mars tends to be passive or weak. In general, you can feel a certain passion and a certain new drive when Mars goes into Cancer. It's not necessarily a negative thing. But if you're used to getting things done and you're used to being quite direct and sort of like that Capricornian energy climbing the mountain without stopping, and you have that strong sense of ambition, this period of time might feel frustrating because there can be a lot of shifting back and forth or a sense of at times feeling frustrated in the quality of your energy, for example, feeling perhaps a lack of energy or lethargy or a feeling of what's the point? I know many people are feeling that anyway these days because of the emotional overwhelm, and this is something that Mars in Cancer can exaggerate or exacerbate. The other aspect of this is that if you have a strong Cancer signature, then Mars is going to really activate all of the placements of your Cancer planets or points. And again, that's going to depend on you, how that actually works for you, but it can be very, very invigorating. And even if that's something that might cause you to be a little bit reactive or perhaps aggressive, or at the very least, ideally assertive, sometimes that can actually be quite good, resolving a situation that became stagnant or something that needed to be acted upon. So I'm going to take a lot of time to look at these different qualities of Mars and and the things that it represents, like anger and frustration and resentment, rage, even, and the qualities that it brings in terms of our day-to-day life, which can be extremely practical, taking action, being efficient, doing things because we have a purpose or an aim in that moment. It doesn't have to be a big life purpose. It's just go do the grocery shopping, for example, then you come home with the groceries. So these things can also bring out the best in you when you activate that Mars. And it's important to know also that when you're not acting with a strong Mars, or when you're avoiding that Mars quality, especially find that in maybe more spiritual circles, or people who were raised in a violent household, who are afraid of expressing anger. They're afraid of the consequences of expressing anger. Paradoxically, that will come back at you. So if you're not expressing your, let's say, self-assertion, or at the time that's necessary, a defensiveness or a solid boundary or a pushback on things that are inappropriate, you will get more Mars from people around you. And what you want to understand, and perhaps this is a brilliant opportunity in these 7 months that Mars is going to be more or less in Cancer, and we'll look at the dates in a moment, but this is a great opportunity to look at yourself and where you are on that spectrum of victim and perpetrator, because there will be different parts of your life that you'll be closer to one than another, and to where you can address the lack. What is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you're not expressing? What is it you're not aware of? To this end, I really recommend doing things like mind mapping around Mars energy. The more challenging emotions are challenging because they eat away at our vitality. So in Ayurveda, for example, it's considered that if we get angry, or if we remain especially chronically angry, or if we lash out even briefly, it's considered that that will deplete what they call ojas, which is our life force. It's a feeling of vitality. It doesn't translate into one specific word, as most Sanskrit words don't, but ojas means this resonance of vitality. And that depletion of ojas starts to erode our sense of well-being, and it starts also to erode our relationships. And so that angry outburst, or the resentment, or the frustration that kind of lingers, or this feeling of injustice that can lead to more anger or lashing out, is simply backfiring. It's pulling your own energy out and depleting yourself. And that, again, over time, will start to diminish your capacity to take healthy action. And you'll find that you either lash out or you act too often through anger, because it just becomes a habit, becomes something that you're habituated to. So that anger is toxic, and in Ayurveda it relates to the dosha, or the quality of pitta, which is the fire, and that links directly to our bile. And we often talk about people being bilious if they're very angry. They get angry, hot and volatile, and that's very much the description of pitta. Um, and why I'm saying this is because we're talking about Mars and Cancer. So we're looking at ways of nurturing ourselves, looking at how can we take care of ourselves in such a way that we take care of the people around us. And so rather than focusing on what might come from outside, and there's no doubt going to be something coming from the outside, focus on how you deal with anger, what your relationship is to anger, and particularly within your own body, which is represented by the moon. The moon is the mind and body and your emotional nature. It's all about your memory and your links to family, your links to especially the mother, and food, and your nurturing qualities. And so think in terms of how can I take care of myself, build my ojas, my vitality, in a healthy, constructive way by taking action as opposed to being angry about things. And often, this is what happens where people, especially in modern times where we have social media, and people feel like they're taking action by making an angry comment in social media. But what that's doing is it's stewing and producing more and more frustration. It's certainly disseminating more and more anger and division, which is another Mars word. dividing and slicing apart, just like a scalpel, which is a Mars weapon. And this is something we need to look at from the inside. So what we seem to think is coming from the outside, what appears to be the enemy from our outer experience is actually coming from within. So this is, and I take that very seriously because this is the way that I work with people, but also because there is no other place that we can control. The only place that we can control and find anything different or changing in our life is going to be coming from our own inner experience, and how we feel and how we engage with life and how we engage with other people is going to be based on our own resonance. And our resonance can be the thing that we can change. A resonance, it's not a woo-woo-woo, this feeling of the vibration that comes from how we're actually dealing with whatever emotions that we have. So whether it's anger or another emotion, it's worth having a look at that. I also wanted to mention that Mars is in the house of the family, in the sign of the family. So Mars in Cancer often, especially natally, will show people having difficulties within their family unit, within home. What is home? Perhaps directly because of the mother, but often the quality of home. And I'm always really keenly aware, especially in a natal chart, that when somebody has this kind of thing, and especially if it's prominent, like attached to let's say the sun or the moon or an angle of the chart, the ascendant, midheaven, etc., then there's a reason that we have these qualities. It's not a random thing. And I really want you to think about that, especially if you're an astrologer, that we would never condemn somebody for the placements that they have in the chart. I see this a lot, especially anytime, and I regret it every time that I mention anything about politics or politicians or international things, that people use certain planetary placements as an accusation as opposed to an understanding of what is coming through that person or that place. So we must never use astrology to, let's say, to point fingers of blame or judgment at an individual. One way you can see this is I did a video a couple of years ago called how did I call it? Something like, Why Does Everyone Hate Meghan Markle? Or something along those lines. You'll find it on my channel. And she has Mars in the first house in Cancer. She has a Cancer rising with Mars there. And one of the things, as I was saying earlier, is if we're not owning our Mars, and if we're not resolving our own desire, nature, and our own motives, and we're not understanding our own emotional composition, we will get that and attract a lot of it coming from outside of ourselves. So it's really helpful in this 7-month period where we've got Mars going through Cancer to use it consciously as a way of understanding yourself better. And ideally, in that Cancerian way, to work towards compassion, which is a lunar quality, the compassion of understanding. So as soon as you start to understand someone, and particularly understand who you might consider to be your enemy, you start to move towards compassion, towards a capacity to forgive. And this would be the ideal outcome, because I see astrology as being a tool that we can learn from. Equally, because I really emphasize taking responsibility for how we deal with our own lives, it's really important to keep reminding yourself that astrology is not something that's reflecting what is happening to you. Although, as I've just said, things can pull in what you're not expressing from around you, but that's still a result of what you're doing or not doing, or how you're not being aware of your own self and your own way of being. And so that victim consciousness that says, oh, some bad thing is coming, and here's me again going to suffer, and here's me again going to be the victim of another whatever cycle of whatever. This is a really bad misuse in my mind of astrology, and it simply reinforces your psychological belief that you're not strong, and that you have no choice, that you have no capacity. Now, in a greater sense, we don't have an enormous amount of free will. There's an awful lot of our life that is composed before we even get here. But within the select choices that we do have, and most especially within our frame of reference, which is our thinking, and our emotions are tied to our thinking, we have more free will than most people actually believe they have. So a lot of people talk about free will in terms of the actions they take, but they won't take responsibility for the free will, which is actually about how they're thinking. So please reflect on these things as it is in your experience, because this is a really interesting opportunity, I think, to dig deeper into that Cancerian lunar quality in our own nature. Now, some signs will be more affected by this than others, especially the cardinal signs will be strongly affected by the conjunction within Cancer, or the opposition to Capricorn, or the squares to Aries, Libra, where we find the nodes, by the way, and where Mars is ruling the North Node still until the end of, or the middle of January. So much of this Mars transit, certainly the September, October part of the Mars transit, is going to be, and 1 week in January is going to be ruled by Mars, where with the North Node then shifts into Jupiter-ruled Pisces. So this ties into a destiny, so we can really examine where is my emotional where's my compass emotionally right now? Where's my psychological compass? And where's that taking me in terms of what I think I want, the goals and things that I want to achieve? On a broader sense, Mars in Cancer also represents issues around protection, defense. It can be avoidant. So Mars in Cancer actually doesn't really seek out conflict. It tends to react to conflict, and it can react in perverse ways. So it's a way of, just like Mars in Libra, it can be what we call passive aggressive. And so the aggression is never really direct. It doesn't come through in a straightforward way like it would, for example, with Mars in Aries. It's going to be much more oblique, or it'll be emotionally manipulative, or there'll be some kind of sort of simmering resentment, or that kind of emotional drawn out response. And so pay attention to that as well, because again, in terms of Ayurveda, that will be depleting your well-being. It depletes your sense of vitality and your sense of well-being. And so, by the way, that the depletion of vitality is not just in the moment, I feel a little tired or I feel a little off. It leads to disease in the model of Ayurveda, which has a much more nuanced look at health than the Western or allopathic way of looking at health or illness, because they don't really look at health. But this way of looking at Pitta, or the Mars energy, this fiery energy, is to understand it as inflammation. And so in this case, with Mars going through Cancer, and again, depending on the house that it's going through, this can also lead to issues of inflammation. Cancer represents the area of the breast, the heart, as well as part of Cancer. So the heart is Cancer and Leo. The heart is in the sense of the organ, and the sense of the health of the organ as sustained by emotions is the Cancer heart. And then the heart in terms of the expression and the vitality of the organ and the way that it reaches outwards from the self and expressing the self as an individual or as a creative force is the Leo heart, let's say. And also Cancer represents the beginnings of the digestion. So Cancer, Leo, Virgo have a lot to do with how we assimilate. So Leo, being that fire, is the energy of breaking down the nutrients, and then Virgo is assimilating those nutrients. But Cancer is how we choose and eat, let's say, the food that we want, and how it's brought to us, how we nourish ourselves. And so again, that comes back to this issue of inflammation. So if you do have chronic illness, chronic issues of inflammation, of course, take care of your body, but at the very outset, look at your emotional nature, because the chronic inflammation always has a huge emotional component, psycho-emotional component, which is about that moon again. So let's just take care of the details here. We look at Mars going in to Cancer on the 4th of September. I'll look at the ingress chart in a moment, because it tells us a lot about the whole of the cycle. But then it's going to go into Leo on the 3rd of November. And so Mars will be 2 months in Cancer, which is already a relatively long time, because usually it's only 6 weeks or so in a sign. And then it starts to get really slow through November, and it slows all the way through to 6 degrees of Leo. And then at the 6th of December, it stations retrograde and it will go back into Cancer, and it'll retrograde, it'll station direct in Cancer on the, let's see, hang on. Yeah, so on the 6th of January, it goes back into Cancer. And then it stations direct on the 23rd of February at in Cancer again. So 6th of December until the 6th of January, it's going to be in retrograde. Sorry, 6th of December until 23rd of February, it's going to be in retrograde motion. So everything that I'm outlining here is going to be something that will perhaps come up for review, or something that needed to be redone, or something to be reconsidered, or some action that needs to be contemplated from a new angle. And that Mars gets back into Cancer and slowly turns around again in February. So we've got then from February until the 18th of April with Mars back in Cancer till it goes into Leo again mid-April. So it's a long stretch. It's 7 months. We had Mars retrograding in Gemini, and that was all in Gemini. So it didn't actually leave the sign of Gemini. Here, what we're doing is we're pulling in the lunar and the solar qualities that Mars is going to be influenced by. And so that's got a lot to do with our desire nature. The sun is our it's our sense of why we're here, our purpose, if you like. It's our consciousness. It represents the eternal self, and the consciousness that we are, as opposed to the body that we have. So there can be some new dynamic in those terms as well. But we'll look closer to the time that it gets into Leo. We'll look at those details. I'm going to focus on Mars and Cancer at this video. And there's a lot to cover in this particular week as well. So as Mars is ingressing into Cancer, we also have a number of other shifts. So this energy will be palpable because we've just had Pluto, rather Uranus, stationing retrograde just 4 days before this ingress of Mars into Cancer. So Uranus is in a stationary position. And then we also have now, where we got Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, and Saturn all retrograde. And in mid-October, we're going to also have, or early October, we're going to have Jupiter retrograde. So there's a lot of retrograde energy. Well, Mars itself is also in a sign that doesn't necessarily bring out this really strong dynamism, or at least the dynamism that it can bring out can be very buried in the emotional layers of things. And so that broader sense of Mars as a protector, or as also in a global sense, it can be around increased nationalism. I see that. I think that's where we're going to really find the biggest problems in this particular cycle of Mars. I'm including the Leo parts of this because I do feel like it's so slow and in the early stages of Leo, I think we're going to see quite a lot of this nationalism, dynamism and aggression towards what is outside, what is not us, let's say, not family, not nation, not neighborhood, whatever. I think we're going to see a lot of frustration around that, especially as long as the North Node is in Aries. As I said, that shifts in the middle of January into Pisces. But we are going to be, seeing quite a lot of this aggression, let's say, towards the other, towards the foreigner, towards what is not home, a defensiveness around property, even physical property. The symbolically, Cancer rules house and home, and property and land, also lineage. So again, there can be really big, strong issues around who has the right to this territory. So we're looking quite literally at colonial violence here with Mars and Cancer. That's one way. It's kind of almost a shorthand for Mars and Cancer on a collective level, colonial violence. Yeah. So, and then of course, in a maybe, let's say, more positive spin, we could say it's patriotic. Right. So the Mars Cancer can be proud and patriotic and defending what is good and true about where we come from. But ideally, it's not going to have to do that at the expense of another. So I think these things will wax and wane again, along with that lunar quality. because Mars will depend on the moon while it's in Cancer. And it will also, of course, be highly aspected at different stages of this transition, let's say. So, right. So what I want to point out in terms of working with your anger, a couple of things from Ayurveda and a couple of things that are just more psychological or personal growth kind of ideas. You do what works for you, obviously, but I'm just giving you some things that I do when I'm working with a client or when I've done this kind of work on myself. I find these things really constructive. So from the point of view of Ayurveda, to reduce anger, we also want to reduce heat overall. You may have noticed that in very hot countries, people are very effusive and they express themselves very outwardly. And that goes with that pitta quality. It's very expressive, very dynamic, very explosive in some ways. And that's not insulting in any way. It's just the way that is. Pitta is very assertive. It takes a lot of leadership qualities, and it's also going to the aggressive spectrum as well. Dominant or aggressive or possessive spectrum as well of the pitta quality. Again, pitta just representing the elements of fire and water, the moisture that comes through bile, the thing that breaks down nutrition, that breaks down whatever we consume. And that's very much the Mars and Cancer image, is this quality of bile, which we need, by the way, to be able to assimilate anything, to be able to operate, to function. And so this pitta quality, this overstimulation of pitta, can be avoided by avoiding stimulants in general. So that means things like ilas, all the good things like alcohol, coffee, if you might be sensitive enough that tea is a problem for you. Anything that has a stimulant, Coca-Cola or colas of all kinds. Sugar is a stimulant, but sugar has an unusual effect on pitta, which it calms pitta. So think of a hot day, you want to have an ice cream. So that can actually work in your favor, but again, in reasonable quantities, sugar can be very favorable to calming pitta. Avoiding things that are sharp, like hot, spicy food. Anything that is hot even in terms of temperature will also aggravate pitta. So you want to just adjust that so that it's, for example, you might want to not drink hot drinks when you find that your pitta is very, very high, when you feel a lot of anger, when you feel a lot of frustration, a lot of rage. Try to cool yourself down. And having said that, Ayurveda wouldn't recommend iced drinks either, but that's another story. But just to say that you can control these qualities in yourself that actually lower the mood. So if you notice on a hot day, people get angry very, very quickly, especially if your climate is not usually very hot. So if the heat is coming on strong, like during a heat wave, or if the heat is building up in a city, there is often, or if you're in a hurry, if you're in a rush, that also aggravates pitta, makes it too strong. And so you find that you flash, you get this rage or this anger that can come out of nowhere in a crowd or in a traffic incident. Road rage comes to mind. So all of these things we can be cautious around in terms of our own experience. How can I cool myself down? And, we have these expressions in every language. In English, we would say cooler heads prevailed. Well, what are we doing? We're calming pitta, because when you're in pitta, when there's an excess of pitta, your head is red. We can see alcoholics by a very ruddy face, a ruddy complexion, a red nose. Another thing is the eyes, overstimulating the eyes, overwork on the computer. And I'm guilty of that. And especially if that's your tendency naturally as well, if you have a pitta tendency, again, that's not something you need to worry about, but just to say that that quality can be more, it might be a susceptibility more so for some than for others. But overstimulation of the eyes stimulates the liver. So the eyes are the organ of the liver. The whatever the condition of the eyes is expressing the condition of the liver. So we want to calm the eyes you can put like a very fine slice of cucumber on your eyes, for example, or rose water and just a little cotton pad or tissue with rose water on it, the real stuff, not the fake rose water. And you lie down and close your eyes and let the eyes cool down, or just splash cold water on the eyes. And this will immediately cool your eyes and the liver itself. So if you take drugs of any kind, prescription or otherwise, that overheats the liver. So that also aggravates the Mars Pitta quality. So we want to try and find ways of cooling that. As I mentioned, sweet does cool Pitta, but salty and spicy will aggravate Pitta. So not too much salt. Stay away from chips and peanuts and salty things in excess, let's say, when it's too hot or when you're feeling you're aggravated. If you eat a lot of nuts, even though in small quantities are very healthy, and especially grilled nuts, will aggravate your liver. It will overheat your liver. So all of these are simple things that you can do personally to calm the heat in your own body, your own way of showing your emotions, and that will immediately quell the emotions. So we are an integrated whole. We don't separate the body, the emotions, the mind, the brain, etc. It's all one. It's all one thing. And if you are in a bad mood, are you hungover? Have you had too much alcohol? Did you have too much coffee? All of those things will aggravate your liver and therefore pitta. So true anger, when it's expressed in a way that is immediate, it will be really healing because you're expressing something that needs to be expressed. But just like imagining a dog in a fight, it's taking care of the battle in the moment, and then the dog moves on. It's just the fight might be even vicious in a very, very brief amount of time, and then the dog moves on. And within a few meters of having this, what felt like a life and death battle, the dog's like sniffing around, wagging the tail, and it's already into the next thing. There's no more need for the anger. And we humans don't have this canine intelligence, so we hold on to anger. So this is especially important because anger in the moment can be extremely constructive. It's not a bad emotion in itself. It's about how you're working with anger. If a child is doing something dangerous, that flash of anger will bring their attention to a halt. They'll focus their attention on you, and you can deal with the anger that causes the energy to rush through you, the testosterone to rise, will allow you also to deal with the situation with the child, let's say, or an animal or another human being. And ideally, the anger is used to prevent further harm. That's the best use of Mars. Think of the classic example is the mama bear. The Mars in Cancer is always astrologically described as the mama bear. It's a good way of looking at it because it's going to be nurturing and careful, but you just don't want to get between a bear and her cubs. She will defend them and she will use violence to do that. So think of it in those terms. Where is the action required? Where is it constructive? And where am I starting to erode my own well-being and the relationships that I have with others, and particularly so in the family? So if we have, like I said, this quality of Mars in the chart, I always wonder, why do we have that? Especially if it's in a natal chart. There was a reason that there was some need to be sharp or to be a little cautious or defensive within the family. There's a struggle within the family. We can't blame the individual for having this quality. It's something that they needed to be born into this experience of life. So as we're going through a transit, this is not necessarily our life path. It's just something that we can bring to our awareness. Now, if you already have Mars in Cancer, then please take to heart what I'm saying. I just want to double check my notes, so I'm sure that I'm covering all the things here. So I mentioned that anger can be super useful. It's just not that we don't want it to be chronic, that there's a toxicity involved with chronic anger. And chronic anger veers off into depression. So frustration, agitation, aggravation, people who are irritable, that's a pitta imbalance. So again, check your diet, do a pitta reducing diet. You'll find loads of information online about that. You don't need to even buy anything. You just do the diet. Eat fresh fruit. For example, this week I'm doing a grape mono diet. You can call it a grape fast as well, but it's technically a mono diet. And every change of season, so around in Europe, for example, we usually by late August, early September start having amazing grapes. Depending on where you are, that might be a little bit later. But any time in September and into October, if you do organic grapes, so you don't want any pesticides on your fruit, you don't want any horrible stuff added to the fruit, preservatives and things like that. You take fresh organic grapes and you can eat 1 to 2 kilos a day. And you would do that for 3, maybe 4 days, up to a week if you want. If you're not well, you can do it longer. That's entirely up to you, but I leave you to investigate that. But anyone can do that. And you can also do it in such a way that you simply incorporate it into your day so that you're taking, say, 1 meal of grapes to replace an otherwise normal meal, or 2 meals of grapes. That's how I introduce the cleanse. I do it 1 or 2 meals a day in the first few days before. Then I do 3 or 4 solid days, sometimes longer. I've gone up to 5 weeks doing this over many, many years. You don't have to do that. It's just something that I do every day that it still feels like the right thing to do. I just keep doing it. And it's temporary, so you don't have to worry about long-term nutrition issues or whatever. But grapes are the ideal fruit. And if you need more information, I can give you more. If you ask a question in the comments, I'll answer. And otherwise, look online. So I'm not recommending for everybody that you do this, but I can definitely tell you that it will reduce pitta, and it will help you also to eliminate inflammation and toxins that have accumulated, and especially it eliminates the heat that's accumulated over the summer, and that's the whole purpose. So we want to eliminate the heat so that when we go into the autumn weather, and I'm speaking from the Northern Hemisphere point of view, we don't end up drying out the body overly. So too much heat dries out the body, leads to vata, which means anxiety and frustration in a different way. So long-term anger is really, really unhealthy. It leads to depression. It leads to a sense of everything being wrong, and that can be appeased by our attention to it. The other thing about that is that anger resolves to sadness and grief. So when we think we're angry, really look inside. And again, if there's any chronicity to it, it's probably coming from a place of loss or sadness and grief around something. And that you want to investigate. So again, if it's something acute and you're just angry about this one thing and it stops, and then you move on, wagging your tail and sniffing like dogs do, you don't need to worry about what I'm saying here. I'm talking about something that is ongoing. And most depression, let's say, unless it's caused by some, PTSD or something more serious, is unresolved grief and sadness. That can be from childhood. It can be a family trait. It can be a bigger story than just an individual. So, right. I think that's it from the Ayurvedic perspective. I wanted to also introduce you to a concept of mind mapping. Mind mapping is something really simple and really interesting as a tool. I'm going to show you, and I'm not sure. Actually, I'll stop the share for a minute. There we go. And I hope this shows up. I just did an example. I'm going to show what. There we go. It's maybe backwards. I don't know. No, it's not really good. But anyway, there we go. Hopefully it's the right way. Anyway, it's a simple thing. And mind mapping is where you take an emotion like anger, frustration, resentment, whatever. You don't need to do it for joy and happiness and things like that, because we don't have a problem to resolve there. Keep those emotions, cultivate them even. And with, let's say, anger, you take that as a central thing. You just put it in the middle of your paper, and then you start drawing lines, a bit like spider webs that come out from the middle. And you start to look at whatever comes to mind about being angry. That might be a person or a situation. It can be personal to you or collective. And you just keep going, and you do it for a minimum of 10 minutes, and you just keep writing and writing and writing, and you don't edit and you don't filter. You just keep saying, okay, my boss said this, or my husband said that, or my wife said this. Like, I didn't get the chocolate ice cream when I was 6. And then these things are coming from your mind, and just respect it. It's there. If it's coming to the mind, it's something that's in the field of your mind. So just respect it, put it on paper. And as you do that over time, especially if you go beyond 10 minutes, you start to draw in things that are really deep, a little bit more like unconscious things. And those things start to become really rich. And then you start to realize things are resolving in one or another direction. They could be loss or sadness. Um, a feeling of resentment that you didn't realize you carried, but it becomes really informative right now. So do that mind mapping. I promise you, for a very small investment in time, you get a huge payoff, and you can do that with yourself. And if you're working with a therapist, then you can bring it along and discuss that there too. Um, and then the last thing was about nonviolent communication, because Mars in the home, let's say Mars in Cancer, it is about being angry for emotional reasons or being angry at those who are otherwise really close to us, the people that are there to protect us, there in our lives. And so nonviolent communication is, it's a gift because it allows you to realize that the way that you're feeling is entirely yours. And this is coming back to what I was saying earlier about owning your emotions. So you're owning how you feel about a situation. You're not a victim of it. You're recognizing, oh, this feeling is in me, but I'm projecting that outwardly. And I think this is one of the most healing things that we can do in this day and age. So all of those are tips for dealing with the Mars in Cancer. I just wanted to lay that out there for you because I think this can be an opportunity to really heal deeply with a lot of conscious awareness. And our society needs this right now. It all starts in home. Like that old saying goes, if there's peace in the heart, there's peace in the home. If there's peace in the home, there's peace in the neighborhood. If there's peace in the neighborhood, there's peace in the world. So we need to take responsibility for where we're bringing our emotions and how they're coming out into the world. So um, I think that was it for me in terms of the basics, in terms of the overall. Let's see. I think I've said it all. If I haven't, I'll add it in the comments or some other time. But let's have a look at this chart, which is now the Mars ingress. Mars is coming to 0 degrees of Cancer on the 4th of September, 2046, so 8:46 p.m. Universal Time. So, for some parts of the world, for example, Australia, New Zealand, East Asia, that will be or even South Asia, that will be the next day. So that'll be the 5th of September. And for the rest, anything going west of Universal Time is going to be on the 4th. But anyway, let's say 4th of September. We have in this particular chart, I took away this ascendant midheaven, but the ascendant is an Aries ascendant, which is really interesting because, of course, now we have a Mars-ruled ascendant, which is where we find the North Node, which Mars is also ruling at this time until mid-January, as I mentioned. And we also find that Mars, which is ruled by the moon, is itself in square, has just perfected a square to the moon. The moon has just moved in to Libra only hours before Mars ingressed Cancer. And as the moon is, as I mentioned, the ruler, the dispositor for this Mars while it's in Cancer, you'll want to keep paying attention also to what the moon is doing, how the moon is contacting other planets, how it might be opposing, squaring, conjunct, or whatever the different important placements in this era that we're living in. That can trigger other bigger issues. So we're looking at things like Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and so on. So we've had, this is a new moon cycle because we've just had a new moon on the 3rd of September. So a day later, we've got Mars moving into the moon's sign. So I have done a video on the Virgo new moon for all signs, so you can have a look at that. Part of that is also covering some of these transits as well. But it's very interesting that Mars is squaring this moon. And the Mars square the moon is also interesting because of the nodal axis. So we have the moon now ruled by Venus, which is at home. She's in her domicile now, where she's in her happy place, where she hadn't been for the last few weeks, where she was in Virgo, where she's in her fall, being in exaltation in Pisces. So she's now in a more comfortable place. But although Venus is quite like the moon, very, very happy with all other planets and has a pretty constructive relationship to them, Ketu, or the south node, does not. And so Ketu is stripping away both the energy of the moon as well as Venus at the time that Mars is ingressing Cancer, already in its place of detriment. Sorry, place of fall. So it's in its fall because it's in exaltation in Capricorn. And so we have a number of different interesting aspects here that are not going to give us, let's say, the best quality results. Let's say on a collective level, individually, we can work with this energy because we can work around it. And especially if we're aware that the symbolism here of the moon, South Node Venus conjunction, especially because Black Moon Lilith, which is also a mathematical point in the sky that is part of the equation between the sun and the moon, Black Moon Lilith is with Venus as well. Now we have this energy that says relationships are going to be hard, and negotiating our way through that, navigating emotionally through that is not going to be easy. And South Node is telling us that whatever we've been trying up until now, it's not working. It needs to change. There's a new mission, a new way that needs to show up in this. Now, it doesn't mean that we should leave behind what is the South Node. It's not. I don't like this idea that we're with the South Node, North Node, that we're moving away from something, that we should abandon the South Node and move towards the North Node. I don't find that a very constructive way of looking at these things. We want to understand what's already there with the South Node, what is natural, what is inherent, which is our tendency. Now, again, if you have this natally, this will be even more reinforced. But for all of us, let's say, metaphorically for the moment, we have this tendency to be in forms of relationship that are not good for us or that are not working for us at the very least. How can we understand that in terms of this emotional Mars in Cancer, and potentially in terms of our nationhood or in terms of our home experience, but especially in terms of how we might lash out or react or take action based on those feelings. So a lot to work with here. I don't think collectively that it's going to be terribly easy or constructive, because just a week after, we're going to get a Mars square the nodes, and it's building to that square and then building all the way to the eclipse. And you can watch the eclipse video of the 18th of September, which is actually a moon in Pisces, but with the node still at that 6-degree point where the node is kind of I use the true node. I don't use the mean node. So the node is hanging in the air at this 6-degree point for a very, very long time. And Mars will be creeping up to that 6th and then the 7th degree by the time of the eclipse. So there's a buildup that's coming towards the middle of September that can inform us of new ways of showing up, new things that we can understand about ourselves, so we can get to that North Node energy, which is saying there's something new and different that has to be realized here regarding Aries, which is about the self and what I want, what are my personal desires, and what is the pioneering energy, we could say, about Aries that we want to bring in here. What was the other thing? So we've got a Mercury also in a very interesting reception. This is known as a mutual reception between the sun that it's ruling and the sun that is ruling it. So we've got Mercury in Leo and the sun in Virgo. So soon after, again, just a few days after this ingress, I think it's on the 7th of September, we've got Mercury moving into its home sign and the sign of its exaltation. So then we're going to have a really strong Mercury. We're going to have a really strong Venus. She'll get stronger as she moves away from the nodes. We want her a long way away from the node so that she can start to bring a little more benefit. And by the time we do get to that eclipse zone, I think we can also find that we're operating from a better place. So Mars, when it's squaring the moon, especially a moon that is a little depleted and it's ruled by a planet that's being depleted by by Ketu, pulling energy away from it, not necessarily acting from confidence or from the best case scenario. We want to understand that can create flashes of anger. And I think this we will definitely see out in the world. But we can deal with that internally. We can deal with that on our own. So let's pay attention to how these things are affecting us globally, but also, first and foremost, take care of yourself. And just on that note, the situations around the world are enraging. There's almost no other word to describe it. The injustice, the lack of harmony. This is again the South Node Libra message is very strong in this last year or more. But what we understand, we really have to get back to ourselves. And I know that it's hard to not be pulled in and not be enraged and frustrated to the extent that you feel you need to lash out. But the only response is what's happening in you. So you're always going to be like a fractal of a bigger picture. So if you want to see something better, if you want to see something that is more harmonious, more constructive, more productive, you need to be coming from that place. And even if you're moving in the circles of protests or other support groups and working with people who've been abused in personal ways or in collective ways, you need to keep working on yourself in that sense and keep that bigger picture in mind. Keep this sense of it's not personal. Don't make this a personal vendetta. And this is also where Mars squaring the moon can lash out. It can be very frustrating. This is a cardinal sign. So we're looking at cardinal energy very, very strong here, especially as Pluto is in Capricorn. And we're going to keep coming back to this because when later on Mars will be squaring Pluto. So towards the end of November, beginning of December, Mars is squaring Pluto. Then it does it again towards the end of October, then again in December, then again in February, I think it is. No, not February. In April, Mars is going to be in an opposition to Pluto. And so that's going to pull in flashpoints. And the more that we can work on ourselves and come back to what makes me angry, why am I truly angry? What's the thing I can resolve here? What can I do about that? Remembering, especially from that Marshall Rosenberg perspective, it's never about the other. It's about how I'm feeling about this and trying to process that feeling and helping other people understand where you're at, rather than throwing out accusations and blame and so on. So there we are. That's the ingress chart. And then I just want to point out another thing that's really interesting, again, slightly related to the eclipses because it's happening kind of in the midpoint. I think it's in fact exactly in the midpoint of the eclipses. But there are two interesting semi-squares. And now I work with quincunxes or inconjuncts and semi-squares and semi-sextiles and these so-called minor aspects. And I find them really valuable. I find them especially so in a natal chart. They add an information of let's say, detail of what is already expressed in the rest of the chart, but it tells us really specifically how this might affect an individual. In this case, it's going to be how we are going to be affected. So these malefic semi-squares are coming in two forms. The first one is with relation to Mars. This is around the 25th of September. Now, it'll be in a few hours of range in terms of the moon, but it'll be in a day-ish of range in terms of Mars. So Mars is coming to conjoin the moon on the 25th of September, universal time. Actually, I think that applies to everyone, given the timing, because it's on middle of the day, basically. And so 25th of September, we have this really interesting and quite tense flashpoint of a semi-square with Uranus at 27 degrees of Taurus. It's retrograding away from where it peaked at 27 and a half-ish degrees of Taurus. And so Uranus is also moving very slowly, and it's also trining Pluto at the same time and continuing its sextile to Neptune. But it's especially this semi-square that interests me because that can be something that creates a certain tension or flashpoint that requires some kind of resolution. It's not necessarily as intense as a square, but it will be these small aggravations, these little things that lead to bigger things. Equally, we have the sun at that same time, which is in its fall. So the sun is exalted in Aries and it's in its fall in Libra. And the sun also is going to be depleted by the south node. So we have both a weakened sun being even further weakened by this south node, which is now ruled by Venus, which is ruled by Mars. So this period of time around the 25th, say 24th, 5th, 6th of September could be a flashpoint for something really quite intense to come up that will especially with Uranus, will be shocking. not necessarily unexpected in the sense that we can expect that something might be happening, but in the form or the way that it's coming through. This can be an economic shock because we've got a Venus that's in her fall, ruled by a Mars that's also not rather Venus in detriment, and also Mars in its fall, and also with a very strong moon, very emotional time, very important for the lunar issues around, especially Cancer-related people or countries. For example, where there's a strong Cancer signature, like the USA, for example. This chart, by the way, resembles the US chart because it has a Sagittarius rising with the moon Mars now in the 8th house. It's going to be approaching the US sun at that time, which is, so this is almost 12 degrees. So by the way, the semi-square, what that represents is 45 degrees. So we add together the degrees here. We have almost 12 degrees of Cancer, plus the 3 degrees that are still left of Taurus, and we add that to the 30 degrees of the sign in the median, and that creates 45 degrees. So we don't really go beyond that, maybe half a degree on either side. It really needs to be quite strong to be able to say something is happening here. You can maybe go a degree, maybe two, especially in a natal chart, but here for events, I would want it to be really, really tight. The second semi-square, again, this is the malefic, so we're talking about something that's not necessarily going to be constructive, possibly even literally quite destructive, potentially a natural event, but also potentially caused by man-made situations or man-made things like the finances or governments or something that tends to be detrimental or explosive, etc. And then here, the second semi-square is between Saturn and Pluto, both of which are retrograde, and also at that 45-degree point, really, really strong. Again, remember, we don't want a really big gap. It's not like a conjunction or a square or a trine even, where we can give a broader number of degrees, up to maybe 8, 10 even degrees, depending. And so here we've got a really tight square between Pluto and Saturn. We've got a really tight square between a conjunction with Mars and the Moon, which is fleeting, but it's the trigger point, which is in a semi-square to Uranus. So I don't know what this looks like. I couldn't even begin to predict, but I can tell you that it's not going to be whatever event is going on there. It's not going to be what we think it is or what we're told it is. It's happening at the same time as a grand Earth trine, where Mercury is picking up. It's very, very intense, getting to the last degree of its sign of both its rulership as well as its greatest dignity. And then it's coming into its cazimi with the sun shortly after that. So a really interesting time of intensity. So I think we'll only probably figure these things out once Mercury is in the heart of the sun. But I think it's worth paying attention, both in your own life, especially if these points trigger something in your own chart, but also what it is that's going on in the world around us, and know that there are some things that we cannot prevent. Natural disasters and things like that happen. This is the quality of life, and so we have to prepare ourselves spiritually and emotionally and psychologically. And I think this is the way to use that Mars in Cancer. Right. So let's come back now to the Mars ingress chart, and I just want to move then through the signs really, really quickly because I see that I'm going way, way over time. But I do like really giving you lots of details because I really feel like if you're using astrology well, you're going to be using it in a way to grow personally. So you don't use it as if somebody's going to do something to you. This is, for me, a complete abuse, both of yourself as well as of astrology. So, right, here we go, Aries. So this is happening in your 4th house of home. So you get this significance in an extremely literal way for Aries, as always. And there's a pure expression in the Aries-led charts. Mars is your chart ruler, or let's say the ascendant ruler. And that planetary lord is really important for you to pay attention to, especially when it's going through your 4th house of what makes you feel secure and safe, what brings you happiness. Where do I live? And do I like where I live? How's my family doing? How's my relationship to my family or my lineage or my people, my nation? All of those questions are going to come through here in a really powerful way as Mars goes for these 7 months through your fourth house. So there's a lot going on for Aries that will require perhaps an atypical slowing down, because Aries tends to shoot from the hip and to react and act very, very quickly to things. Beware of impatience, beware of lashing out, beware of retaining anger, beware of all the things that I said in the beginning of this video. I really would love you to take to heart and really pay attention to your overall well-being, your personal health, physical and mental and emotional, and also how that affects the people in your circle. So you're going to get quite a lot of impact because the North Node is also in your first house of self. And we have a lot going on with the South Node, Venus, and the Moon, as well as Lilith with Venus in your seventh house, which suggests that there's lots of frustration building, or lots of things that require your attention and adjustment around relationships in ways that are not necessarily going to be comfortable, but will bring you, ideally, to a place of resolution. So yeah, good luck with all of that, Aries. I'll see you in the next video. So Taurus, this is happening in your third house of expression and communication, neighbors, neighborhoods, your local space, with the people that you know, how you say things, maybe including writing, for example. You might find yourself deciding that you want to express yourself more through the written word or through more emotional expression. Your emotions do affect very strongly how you express and communicate with other people. The moon is exalted in Taurus. And so that third house moon suggests that there is a lot of emotionality in the way that you connect and communicate with others. So we can see that is part of the significance of Taurus, or part of the symbolism, let's say, of Taurus. And it's not because it's just Taurus, it's because the third house is ruled by your moon. This also can represent extended family, uncles, cousins, and people like more in your neighborhood. And so there can be something that happens in their life, but it can also be something that is happening through you in that context of other people. So this is a time to avoid negative speech, or let's say harsh speech, speech that can be gossipy or challenging. This is quite significant, especially if you do have Mars in Cancer anyway in the third house, because that's kind of a speech that can tear people down. So it can be also quite confident and quite driven by passion, by a belief or a sense of purpose in terms of what you feel strongly about, what you might want to defend or protect. But it can also be quite harsh, sarcasm and things like that. So be careful of that. Also, with Mars in the third house, you can be extremely busy. Now, this can be also a time where you're extremely preoccupied with practical stuff, like you have to do quite a lot of things, whether it be lots of running around, moving things, new aims. It's also another way of looking at Mars in the third house, new goals. So you might be finding that overall it's time to have a new goal. And certainly as the North Node ruled by Mars is going through your 12th house, you might be starting to look from a deeper place, a more spiritual place in your life. Than as Mars is moving into your fourth house, you're also going to want to look at how you can feel secure, how you can feel safe. So this could be a really interesting time to check your thinking. As I said in the beginning, check what is my degree of relationship to this victim consciousness or perpetrator consciousness. Sometimes the nicest people can be the most challenging because they're perpetrating from behind the scenes, as it were. And that's that Mars in Cancer kind of tendency. It's a little hidden, it's a little bit oblique, it's not quite direct. And so be careful, because that's not good for you or the people around you. So there can be divisiveness, and that can include with siblings and extended family as well. So you also have this moon squaring that from the sixth house of your health and everyday activities. So with this feeling of things not being entirely powerful or giving you the best results, be careful of your health as well. I would have to see your chart to know for sure, but your ruler, Venus, and the moon, which is your exalted ruler, are afflicted both by Mars by square as well as by that south node, and are in the Dustana house in the sixth house of challenges. So if there are any sneaky health issues, take good care of them and deal with them quickly. And especially if they are coming from emotional, psychological, or other things, because one of the qualities of Taurus is, as a fixed sign, is that there, and it's fixed moon. Remember, the moon exalted in Taurus, it's fixed. There can be a stubbornness around emotions and forgiveness and the need to move on. So look at all of that. And I think you'll find fantastic results after these 7 months of passage with Mars through your third house. So good luck, Taurus. I'll see you in the next video. Gemini, this is happening in your second house of money. It's everything that supports you. So it also includes family. So especially because it's Cancer, that emphasis on family is even stronger for Gemini rising. This is for the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. But this energy of Mars in the second can cause some kind of strife, or it can cause extra expenses. It can cause some kind of disruption. There may be a challenge based on what you desire and what you need to be doing. So your ruler is in the third house in Leo, ruled by the sun in the fourth house, and in this mutual reception. So there seems to be something around house and home, and maybe siblings, or maybe choices that you're making that are affecting this Mars, maybe having to spend more or to deal with more strife than usual, or to work harder maybe for money. And the North Node that Mars is ruling is in the 11th house. So there's something perhaps tying in gains from what you do, a new way of putting more, say, elbow grease into what it is that you're trying to do, how much you want to earn, and what resources you have at your disposal, as Mars is, for the moment anyway, until mid-January, ruling that North Node in the 11th. Your moon, Venus, and Lilith are with the South Node in your fifth house. So there may be something that you realize that you need to sacrifice in terms of pleasure, or what you have been doing in the past for pleasure, that you realize are actually potentially holding you back from where you want to go. With that North Node in the 11th house. So look for that. It can be, the fifth house can be where we are, we take risks, where we do things in a way that is producing joy and so on. And whatever's going on here seems to be a bit frustrated at this time, especially with that Mars squaring the moon. So something to look at over this period of time. And so not just at the beginning of September, but over the period of time that Mars is in the second house. Be careful with spending. Be careful with issues around work as well, that you're also taking care of your health, because Mars rules your house of illness, the sixth house of everyday stuff, work, illness, obligations, and so on, as well as the 11th house of your vision for your future, social groups, and the earnings that you might have from what you do. So I'd have to see your natal chart to see how that might pan out for you, but it's definitely something to pay attention to, especially as Pluto has moved back into the 8th house, where it's showing you something about your unconscious processes, or about things that are hidden, perhaps family secrets and things that you might need to deal with. And that can be very constructive. And so make sure you watch the introduction to see all that. All right, good luck with that, Gemini, and I'll see you in the next video. And of course, Cancer, we've got Mars. I say we because I have both the ascendant and the moon in Cancer, and we've got Mars there in the first house of self. And so Mars for Cancer, again, depending on what your quality of Mars is, or what the quality of your moon is, which house they're in, can be really, really constructive. It can also be frustrating, or cause frustration around you. And so if you are a more passive type of Cancer, that you don't really express your anger, or you don't know really how to step forward on your behalf, assert yourself, the Mars going through the first house can be fantastic. It definitely will bring dynamism. It'll definitely bring you to a place of more activity, and especially because Mars rules your 10th house of career and how you engage socially, where we anyway have the North Node And so there's going to be a lot of engagement, personal engagement in what you do, in your career, in your sense of ambition, in the way that you show up in the world. And then, of course, Mars also rules your fifth house of children and your creative self-expression. It can be also about business and related activities. So listen to the introduction. This is very personal for Cancer. Definitely a great opportunity to work on issues around Mars, around how you take action, around how you express anger, around how you deal with your own personal anger or frustrations. Um, what else? Illness, any issues around health or illness. Um, that's really worth paying attention to at this time. So do listen to the introduction because I think you'll get a lot more. It's very personal in this case to Cancer, especially if you've got Mars there and you're having your Mars return, which you would get every 2 years. And I mentioned Meghan Markle. You might be interested in looking at that video from a couple of years ago about why people don't like Meghan Markle. She's got the Mars in Cancer, so you can see a number of qualities that's specific to her chart, but it gives you a general overview of how that attracts frustration from other people. So that's another thing where you can find, especially as Pluto's gone back in the seventh house, power issues with others. That power struggle can be there quite a lot through the autumn because Pluto will be opposing Mars both in October, at the end of October, and also again in December. And the one last time in April. I think it is April. So those oppositions create tension and power struggles. So there's something for all cancers to really understand about how they materialize or how they express their anger, how that can help or hinder them, and how that affects the quality of their relationships and also how they participate in their career. And then, of course, the moon, South Node Venus, and Lilith are in the fourth house. So at this time, there can be something that is challenging around house and home. And that fourth house also represents what makes you feel secure, what makes you feel happy in general. What is it that you need financially, emotionally, psychologically to feel secure? So there's something being tested here. The moon is being squared by Mars. And anytime, by the way, while Mars is there in Cancer, anytime it goes into a cardinal sign, which it will every month because the moon moves quickly through the signs. So every time it goes into Aries or Cancer or Libra or Capricorn, it's going to be challenging that Mars. And so there might be an emotional tension that comes for all of the cardinal signs, but especially for the Cancers who are ruled by the moon. So I think that's it for now, Cancer. And I'll keep talking about this. So that's not the end of the discussion. Good luck with all of that. And so Leo, this is happening in a very important part of your chart, which is your, let's say, your hidden tendencies or your unconscious processes or your relationship to your deeper inner self, your spiritual self, your ancestors. It's where things are not really clear to you. And so you might find that there's a lot of stuff that comes up in ways that are not really obvious and not really easy for you to determine what is the cause of whatever I'm feeling. And so it's really important to listen to what I said in the beginning of this video to help care for your well-being, care for your overall mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual, physical health. With the Mars going through the 12th for such a long period of time, because it can also contribute to issues around what the 12th house represents, which is self-undoing, things that we're doing that are not necessarily in our own, bringing us benefit, let's say. They're not working towards us, but also it's the house of hidden enemies. With Mars going through the 12th, you might start to discover that certain people are really not there for you in a way that you had hoped that they would be. You are going to have perhaps some issues or things that require conversation, require some kind of navigation with others through communication or exchanges of some kind. At the same time, because Mars is squaring that moon conjunct the South Node and Venus with Eris. So there's some tension going on there that can be around how you communicate or what needs to be communicated or how people are connecting with you, perhaps through siblings or friends. This is your local space. It's acquaintances as well. cousins and extended family, for example, but also like commerce and business as well. And then because Pluto is also in your sixth house, and that will be in opposition to Mars over time, over these months to come, that Pluto going through the sixth house is also just one last time going to reflect any health issue or any issue around your day-to-day setup that's not working for you. It's at the same time it's in a trine to Uranus, which has been clearing out your 10th house and changing your way of showing up in the world and changing your ambitions and what it is that you feel like you need to be doing. So this is a great opportunity to get real with yourself. It also is a great opportunity to grow spiritually and grow in terms of your sense of what is your purpose, because that North Node is ruled by Mars. North Node in the ninth house since July 2023 is asking you to focus on your sense of purpose. What do I believe? What am I here for? So a really important placement. I don't find the 12th house insignificant by any stretch of the imagination, because it's kind of like it's like the operating system, and we have all these glossy apps and there's all these things that we see on the surface, but it's the operating system is the 12th house, how it all runs in the background. And so take care of that operating system, and especially watch out for glitches, watch out for those hidden enemies, those things that also, by the way, self-undoing, that is part of the hidden enemy stuff. So what we think is coming from outside is actually coming from, like the movie says, it's called coming from within the house. And speaking of that, the Mars rules your fourth house of home. So dealing with these issues, father issues can come up as well. Mars rules your house of father, ninth house rules your home. So issues with the either living or deceased that have had a very strong influence on you, and also, of course, ancestral influences, very, very strong for you at this time. So for a long, long time, 7 months. So make the most of that, Leo, and I'll see you in the next video. And so Virgo, this is a really significant placement for you too, because Mars will be spending a long time in your house of the future, your vision for the future, also what your kind of dreams are of the life that you want to lead. This has been changing a lot with Uranus going through your ninth, but right now you're putting specific attention on these things. And so it can also have something to do with earnings, money that you earn from what you do, especially because Venus, which is ruling your second house, is also in your second house, along with the South Node and the Moon. So there's a lot of attention on money issues, who supports me, who doesn't. With the North Node in the eighth house, there might be a need for a new support or a desire to, or maybe a connection that's coming through intimacy or through marriage, some situation in marriage that's changing. Of course, your relationship house is being profoundly transformed there with that Saturn and Neptune. And then Mars going through the 11th can also have you in tension or in conflict with groups, and whether they're political or spiritual or social groups, friends and acquaintances kind of thing, casual friends, where you may have shared ideas and beliefs, but you don't any longer. You don't share the same values. And that's perhaps where this Mars squaring the Moon, South Node, Venus is coming in, because there's something here about values that needs to be reconsidered or let go, moved on from. As the month goes on, Venus will move away from the South Node. The Moon very soon after this ingress moves away from the South Node, and that becomes clearer. But at the ingress, we look at that as almost like a natal chart for the Mars going into Cancer. So that keep this in mind throughout the 7-month period. Yeah, so lots of ideas there around how you connect socially, what you believe in terms of your vision for your life or what you want to see in your future, and then how you connect with what supports you financially or morally otherwise. So who's got your back? North Node in the 8th house. Right. And so, of course, Mars rules your 8th house. It rules your 3rd house. So also pay attention to your emotions, because how you feel and how you're dealing with your emotions will dictate how you communicate. That might actually be potentially a source of tension with friends groups or with other groups around you. So maybe have those conversations internally before you have them externally, just to be sure that you know why you're saying what you're saying or why you're expressing certain things. Or if you make a mess and you get an angry outburst that causes some disruption, you just go back and clean up your mess, just knowing that this is part of the growth cycle. Your ruler is in the 12th house at this time in a mutual reception with the sun that's in your first house. And soon after, on the 7th of, I think it's the 7th, maybe a few days anyway, after, I've forgotten the exact date now, your ruler goes into your first house. So you're going to have a much easier time expressing what needs to express, and you probably feel like doing that as well. It'll come much more naturally to you. All right, Virgo, good luck with all that. I'll see you in the next video. And Libra, this is happening in your 10th house of career. So big deal. When Mars goes into the angular houses, it's always going to create some kind of really big focus. And since you already have the North Node ruled by that Mars going through your 7th house for quite some time, there's a new, perhaps, relationship with either a boss or colleagues that is quite dynamic. Now, be careful with the Mars going through the 10th house. There can be tensions in work environments where people feel, whether it's true or not, but they feel that you might be ultra competitive, or there might be some sense of not being paid attention to with that Mars going through the 10th, that can have them feel threatened by your ambition. You know, Mars in the 10th is extremely ambitious. It's very strong in the 10th house, so very strong for you, Libra. And although the internal tendency or the way that you approach life is to try and find harmony, just at especially in the initial phase here, we still have the South Node Moon and Venus with Lilith that are suggesting that it's not so easy to find that harmony. The desire is there, there's no doubt, but it's not so easy to find that harmony. And that moon is initially on the 4th, in a square, a tight square to Mars that is being ruled by that moon. So there may be some tensions. It may be fleeting, but also keep in mind this is the ingress chart. And so that quality is something that you should keep in mind over the period of 7 months that Mars is there. Because it's kind of like an announcement of that. This is the quality of things that you'll be looking at over the next period of time. So that North Node in the 7th house is ruled by Mars. So you might also find that you're getting new relationships through work or through your social connections or through your social status, that you might meet people. It might be that there's a Martian quality to that, or martial quality to that, which is either through some kind of sports figure or some kind of assertive, dynamic figure, or even like police, the usual firefighters, police, military, and so on. So this is also part of that. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It would have to depend on your natal chart. It's hard to say that that would be the case, but it's potential. The potential is there that a new relationship can come through the work that you do or through the new ambitions that you have over these next few months. Especially as you're changing your ways here at Libra with the South Node over the last year or so going through your first house. You're showing up in a different way, more of a drive in the area of relationships. So good luck with whatever that represents for you. Oh, and be careful, because just briefly, you're going to have this tension with Pluto. Certainly until the end of October, beginning of November, when Pluto and Mars will be opposing. So there may be something there that comes through family, or some psycho-emotional tension, or something around home that Pluto is resolving, and you're dealing with, let's say, to wrap up the last 16 years there of Pluto. And Mars will be coming back and forth in opposition to that Pluto, but after that, it's going to be in your 11th and 5th house. No longer it's going to be the 10th and the 4th house. So you really only have that one opposition here in the Cancer Capricorn axis. So you can look back over those last 16 years and try and figure out what that means to you, what it meant to you, and what you're needing to take action on, because that's what the Mars is asking you to do. All right, Libra, good luck with that. I will see you in the next video. And now, Scorpio, you are ruled by Mars, so this is really significant. Always pay close attention to what Mars is doing, as Scorpio is, you are the nighttime sign of Mars's domicile. And now we have Mars in the 9th house of your future, your vision for your sense of purpose and what your aims are in life, what you feel you believe in, what you have faith in, dynamics around travel, perhaps international travel, or perhaps around travel with a purpose, like going to a convention, for example, or traveling to learn something, or traveling to share what you know. All of that is very strongly indicated here with your ruler going through the ninth. And whatever this new thing is, whatever you're cultivating in terms of what your new vision is, in terms of your, what you might call your dharma, the first, fifth, and ninth are all dharma houses. Why am I here? Well, how do I express myself? How do I do this thing out in the world? And then Mars acting as your sort of guide or ambassador, your missive, let's say, in the ninth house, is pulling you into the ninth house for 7 months. So there's a big focus on your sense of a big picture. What is this life all about? What is this world all about? What do I believe? And whatever you achieve and what you ever understand about that, Mars will pull into your 10th house, and you cultivate that then as you take it out into the world. We'll look at that as we go through the months ahead when Mars shifts into Leo. So this is a really wonderful transit because it's a trine to you. So, and it's your planet. So it's going to give you a lot more support, let's say. And you do pretty well with the more challenging aspects of life. So you've got Saturn in the fifth house. It may feel like you're being slowed down in some way in terms of your creativity, but you're being slowed down to do it better, let's say. And Mars will give you a better vision. Mars in the ninth house is like a spiritual warrior. It doesn't have to be specifically spiritual, but it's could be based on social justice or legal, literal justice, politics as well. Again, very strong for this period of time. And Mars is ruling your sixth house as well. So it rules yourself. It rules your everyday life, your health, the things that you do, the way that you overcome obstacles. This is why Scorpio can withstand so many obstacles, is because Mars rules the sixth house. It's where all the crap happens. It's where all the difficult things come up. It's all the challenges that you have to face. You've got Mars that has your back in those day-to-day things that make it difficult. So you're like, don't worry, bring it on. This is why that Scorpio energy does so well in jobs that are challenging, like medical emergencies or police, military, like surgeons are also Mars Scorpio kind of energy. So these are all things that you are well equipped at this time to deal with. With the North Node and being ruled by that Mars, you're going to bring some vision to how you do your everyday stuff or how you overcome challenges, maybe a better perspective on all of that stuff. South Node is with the Moon and Venus, and the Moon is ruling this Mars. It's in a square on the day. So the 4th of September, Mars is being squared by the Moon that rules it. So there's some emotional tension. There's a need to recalibrate, perhaps emotionally. There's a need to recalibrate in terms of perhaps even the psyche, especially so because for you, the South Node has been in the 12th house. Maybe you're realizing some stuff around how you are handling your everyday things. Can be about addictions as well, where there may be some issue that requires your attention around your daily habits, where the North Node is asking you to go in a different direction. Again, that Mars in the ninth can bring you a bigger vision for your life. Like, I'm here for more important things now. And so all of these things are going to be expressed over the next 7 months, but especially a kind of a keenly felt expression in the first week of September. And then, of course, Mars will be opposing Pluto 3 times from the top of your chart. So a lot of what you're building now in terms of your vision and your sense of what you're here for is actually going to be coming from what you are realizing you need to modify in terms of the foundation of your life. And I mean that in the metaphysical sense as well as in the physical sense, including like, where do I live? But also, how do I feel about all that? How do I feel in terms of my security, in terms of what I need to feel happy? So quite a lot that Mars is going to be bringing to you, but I think as a trine to you, fellow water sign, it's actually bringing you a great deal of benefit in this time. So make the most of that, Scorpio. I'll see you in the next video. And Sagittarius, we have Mars in the 8th house. So here we've got quite a lot of effort to put through issues that have to do with fears, overcoming fear. So Mars can be really helpful in that sense, overcoming fear, overcoming patterns that have haunted you in terms of secrets or things that have not been really easy to either grapple with or deal with. Mars rules your 12th house of things that we're not really seeing clearly, the hidden aspects of self or the hidden aspects of the lineage, ancestral stuff, faraway places. And it also rules your 5th house of children and how you express that, your creativity, your sexuality, and Mars going through the 8th house, which involves sexuality in the intimate sense, including also psychological and emotional intimacy. There may be something that you're bringing in, especially as Jupiter is also in your 7th, your ruler in the 7th. There may be something you're bringing in terms of a new way of expressing your sexuality or a new way of finding more drive or maybe more comfort with the way that you are sexually, or at least in intimacy, emotional intimacy, for example. Saturn going through your 4th will have been, trying to reframe, let's say, what makes you feel secure emotionally and psychologically. So it's not necessarily an easy time. And so whatever new stimulus this is can actually be quite encouraging. Mars rather, is also in a square to the moon at the time. So this is moving on to the 5th now, but on the 4th, when Mars ingresses Cancer, Moon and Mars are square. And then Mars itself, closer to the time of the eclipse on the 18th, is going to be squaring the south node from your 11th and the north node in your 5th, which it's ruling. So there's something here about a vision or a dream or an idea or even a group of friends or a thing that you used to do, or even perhaps a form of income that you're no longer benefiting from, because Mars also in the 8th house of other people's money can cause friction or tension. So you might have to be sacrificing or ready to let go of, or not any longer expecting income to come from somebody else or from an organization or from an inheritance, or if there is an inheritance that there can be a certain amount of friction, especially for Sagittarius, because Mars rules your 12th house of those who've passed. And it's the house of loss. So Mars in the 8th, if there's any issue around money, it'll either require you to step up and struggle a wee bit and fight a little bit for that, or it will be that there is some awareness that it's no longer what you're able to depend on, let's say. And Pluto, whatever Pluto has shown for you the last 16 years, will give you a bit of information around that, because it'll show you where maybe there's some need to change your relationship to money or your value or your family, which is second house stuff. All right, Sagittarius, hang in there. I promise you, things are going to work in your benefit. When you have Jupiter moving into your 8th, you're going to start to feel yourself coming back online, and that's next summer. And so do this behind the scenes stuff, do this deep work, this deep cleansing. Don't let's say, don't hesitate to slash and burn and release old friendships, release old relationships, release old ideas and old fears, so that you can clean your slate and prepare then for Jupiter to move into your 8th house in Cancer, where it's exalted. That's your ruler. So good luck with that, Sagittarius. I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, I mean, what else do you need? You've got Pluto back in your house. Now you've got Mars in your 7th house of relationships. So, you haven't really taken the gloves off, have you? So carry on. With Mars in the 7th, all things are possible. It depends on your natal chart, but it can be that there's friction in relationship, especially business partners or marital partners, important relationships. And it can also just mean that there's a lot more dynamism around that, or that if there is any issue, now watch the initial part of this video, if there is any issue around unexpressed anger or around anger that is not understood, frustrations and so on, you will see that coming from other people. You will definitely attract that, especially as Pluto is opposing Mars in this dynamic. So don't imagine that it's always coming from them. Check yourself first, because you've also got that Mars ruling your 4th house, which has a lot to do with your, again, that part of the unconscious or the psychological nature and the foundation of that. And that's where we find the North Node. So put a lot of your attention still on growing in terms of that psychological and emotional foundation, how you express anger, how you deal with your family, how you deal with even property, because this might be something to do with that too. Something again to do with work, and we've seen this in a couple of videos and a couple of the last month's events where there's something that you're working towards releasing in terms of social ambitions or social status or whatever aims that you may have had in the past. Now you're releasing all of that. So this is with the square from the moon to Mars, just at the ingress of Mars into Cancer. There's something that might agitate you around work or around your relationships in general. And that is going to be perhaps a flag that shows you where you need to work on this thing, whatever the thing is. Mars is exalted for Capricorn, and so it tends to bring you some good benefits. So Mars tends to work really well for you. So don't worry about this, but take responsibility, good Capricorn word, take responsibility, be a good Saturn role model, and tell your Mars what you want it to do rather than allowing that anger to come from a hidden place or a hidden agenda or other people. Because we've got Saturn, your ruler, in the third house of connection with others, how you manage communication. So this might be an opportunity to realize that there may be some passive aggressive tendencies or this thing that you're not aware of in terms of how you connect. Mars also rules your house of the future, your vision for the future, money that you earn from what you do, social connections, your social vision, or the groups that you spend time with. And so there might be some new people coming in there with that Mars going through your seventh. And so you might find that you are connecting with people through a purpose, because Mars is all about what action do we need to take. This could be something that is, again, based on what I was saying in the beginning about nationalism or some purpose of either defensiveness or nationalism or some kind of motive that has you feeling that there's something you want to stand up for. All right, I'll leave it there, Capricorn. Good luck with all that. I'll see you in the next video. Aquarius, you have Mars in the sixth house, which actually can be quite helpful because Mars or any of the challenging planets going through the sixth house can help you resolve things in a way that you catch. Let's say Mars in the sixth can lead to issues around inflammation. So please watch the introduction. Mars in the sixth can show up as digestive or other issues that are causing you some kind of stress or grief. I would say if you're having issues like that, absolutely consider the possibility that they are psychosomatic, that they're coming from emotional issues unresolved or psychological or even spiritual issues that are unresolved, especially so because we've got Pluto that's just briefly moving back into your 12th house of self-undoing, and that will be opposing Mars a couple of times, creating some kind of tension and push and pull. What I said in the beginning also about this issue of where you are on the level of victim and perpetrator is interesting to think about as well. Where are you on that range? And in which cases? Because some places, like some people are feeling victimized at work and then they come home and they're like the abuser at home to compensate. And I'm not suggesting that's you. I'm just saying that's an example of this, looking at that, how it moves from one context to another. Mars is squaring the moon that's in your ninth house, where Venus, South Node, and Black Moon Lilith are also found. So there's a lot of attention on issues that might need to change around your sense of what you're here for, or around your sense of what you believe and have faith in. There may be a wobbly moment where you're not so sure anymore. Mars is ruling your house of communication, as well as your 10th house of career. So whatever you're doing now, in terms of taking care of your health, in terms of your everyday habits and the structures of things that support you, is leading you to new aims, new goals, third house, North Node, and then also a new vision in terms of how you're going to show that in your social status or in your career ambitions, the way that you show up outside the front door. So that Mars in the sixth can be extremely helpful. It's 7 months of Mars in the sixth house where you can bring a lot of dynamism. And Mars is going to be ruling that North Node in the third house until mid-January. So whatever you do, the things that you're doing in terms of your habits and the things that you defend against potentially as well, because that's the house of open enemies as well. So this is the time to stand up to people. This is the time to say, hey, that contract didn't work out for me. You would benefit a lot from finding your voice in this. This is anyway what the North Node in Aries has been asking you to do. Find that voice, find that way of communicating in a way that brings out assertion that heals any sense of misplaced, not a feeling of not belonging, feeling of inadequacy, because Chiron has been there for some time, testing your sense of whether you're good enough, whether you belong. Mm. Right. All right. So good luck with that, Aquarius. I'll see you in the next video. And Pisces, you've got Mars in the fifth house, and that's very good for creativity and creative drive that can actually lead back to income because Mars rules your second house of income, and that's where you have the North Node. So there may be something that you're seeing, you're envisaging as a project or some kind of teaching endeavor or something to do with your children or something to do with whatever creative babies you're creating. It could be also love interest. It could be something that has to do with a relationship, a new way of being in relationship that's going to be quite dynamic and quite driven for the next 7 months or so. Mars also rules your ninth house of what you believe, what you feel is your purpose. So that creative impulse, that feeling of self-expression, this desire to be seen and noticed with that Mars going through the fifth house can really help you try to navigate what it is that you feel you're here for in a bigger sense. And the North Node in the second house is giving you an opportunity to develop your, let's say, your sense of value, your personal self-worth, your personal value, where Chiron has maybe diminished that or had you question that at times, but also is in fact training you to value yourself even more, and that will reflect in your income and the stuff that you have. It's about how a new relationship to stuff, property and valuables and things like that. And so that Mars is there for 7 months in your fifth house. It's very helpful for being comfortable taking risks, being comfortable doing things that may have held you back in the past that will bring new results into that second house. Pisces tends to have to be self-reliant financially, depending on your chart, but at least in the way that the second house is ruled by that Mars, Aries. So you're doing it on your own, especially because here we have the South Node in the eighth house and the North Node in the second house. It says that whatever is going on financially and in terms of your self-worth and in terms of family, you've got to do a lot of stuff on your own. You're not at this particular moment really able to trust other people or deal with, let's say, not trust them, perhaps that either, but not able to rely on them at this particular moment, not forever, but this beginning stage, especially where you realize, oh, I've got to do this thing myself. I've got to create this myself. So there may be some inner fear with that moon squaring Mars on the fourth in the ingress chart. There may be some inner fear that is showing up that is allowing you to realize, oh, I need to overcome this thing, South Node. I need to learn from what I already know, pull that in and bring it out into my second house of where I find my value and where I can also earn money, where I can have more wealth. By the way, the South Node in the eighth can also pull in knowledge of the occult, and Mars in the fifth house is the house in the Indian astrology of wisdom, knowledge, mantra that comes from it's one of the teaching houses, comes from what we learn, what we know, and Mars brings that out into the ninth that it's ruling. So that can also be part of this, that you're recognizing, oh, wait, I have this potential. I have this like innate thing that I know how to deal with. I know what to do about that. And then I pull it through into that North Node that Mars is ruling all of this time until mid-January. And then the North Node goes into your first house. And that becomes an opportunity for you then to say, hey, guess what? I've changed and this is the way I'm doing that. I'm doing that differently. Mars is going through your fifth and then into the sixth, as I mentioned in the very beginning, then opposing that Pluto between the 11th and 12th. So there's something about the people that you spend time with, the vision that you had in the 11th house for your future, for your vision for life, your dreams for life. And Mars is participating in changing that, especially towards the end of October, beginning of November, then again in December December, January, and then in December, January, and then again in April. I hope I've got those dates right. Right, I'll put the dates in the first comment below the video because nobody apparently is aware of the description box below the video. So I'll just put it in the first comment and then hopefully people will see that. Anyway, good luck, Pisces. This looks like a very creative opportunity for you because you are in a trine. It's a fellow water sign. You're in a trine, and Mars in the fifth can bring some really interesting dynamism, creatively, intimately, etc. In the house of love affairs, by the way, too. So there can be some really interesting developments over time, perhaps, again, depending on your chart. All right, Pisces, good luck with all that, and I'll see you in the next video.